Hi, welcome to Scott's Synth Stuff. I'm Scott, and this is my new studio. Coming up next. So how did we get here? I started out with a studio, well, actually, if you want to know the truth, I started out when I was 17, 18. I bought a Korg Poly 6 and an Ensoniq Barrage. I had no money left over after buying those two things on payment plans. Thank you, Long & McQuaid in Toronto. And after I had those two synthesizers with no money left, I had a cassette recorder, no effects, no pedals, no reverb, no nothing. So I worked as a DJ and I used those two synthesizers to create tracks. I eventually found or otherwise acquired a second tape recorder, so then I could record two tracks on left and right because they were mono synthesizers. So I had a 2-track recorder, and then I could play on top while I dubbed to a second cassette recorder. So now I could bounce back and forth, and kind of like the early Human League, all my music would kind of descend into a muddy hiss of magnetic tape. But I could do multi-track recording this way, and I would build up tracks each week, and then on the weekends I would take them to my clubs and play them in the clubs, which was great because who else is going to play your music? This is back in the late 1980s. Not only did I have the experience playing clubs, so I knew what people liked and what got people on the dance floor, I was able to start learning how to create my own music that did that as well. Eventually I did save up and I got a 4-track, and then I got a mini disc, and the equipment started building. Then came the late 90s and I kind of got out of keyboards. My stuff was just sitting around on A-frame racks and not being played, not being used. So I sold it all for sickening prices. I sold my Poly 6 for $100. I sold my DX7 for, I think it was $150. I sold synthesizers that were worth so much money today for next to nothing. In fact, I might have even given away a couple. Then comes the computer revolution. I started with Cakewalk, and then Cubase came along. We had VSDs, we had soft synths, and I really got into it. I started using Cubase exclusively, but I still had no synthesizers. I had a couple controllers to play my soft synths, but I was recording everything just in my computer and my DAW in Cubase. Then I thought, you know what? I really should get just another synthesizer. Maybe I could play it out places, and it would be nice to have a piece of hardware again. So I got my little Yamaha MG12XU mixer there, and I bought a Yamaha MX49, which was a nice lightweight. It was blue. Nice little synthesizer based on the Yamaha motif, which I knew the motif. It sounded good. It was great for playing live. It was actually decent enough sounds that you could record with it. So I started doing some recording. Of course, the Yamaha MG12XU is a 12-channel mixer, and it works as an audio interface, but only 2 channels. So you can record stereo channels, and then you can record another stereo channels into multiple tracks inside your DAW. Works great. Well, of course, the MX49 didn't last that long. I got a Modi X, and then I got, what else did I get after that? I got the Wave State, I got a Rephase. Basically, the synthesizers started showing up, and I quickly ran out of channels on my MG12XU. It got to the point where I had several stands of synthesizers in my studio, and I would have to unplug them and plug them into the mixer depending on which one I wanted to record. So I upgraded to the Soundcraft 22 MTK, 22 channels. Not only that, the audio interface built into that mixer was also 22 channels. So I could record 22 channels of audio at once. I could have 11 synthesizers all plugged in and record all 11 at the same time. So I hooked up all my synthesizers, so I had MIDI, I had audio, I could feed it in. It was great. I'd never have more than 11 synthesizers in my studio, so that mixer would last me forever. Yeah, I'll never have more than 11 synthesizers. Who needs more than 22 channels of audio? Well, I have more than 11 synthesizers. I needed more than 22 channels of audio. I was also running out of space in my studio. You see pictures of my studio here. I was using a bedroom in my house as a studio. It was just crammed with synthesizers. I had my stands with my main synthesizers, and then I had a little X stand off to the side, and that was like my guest spot. So whichever synthesizer didn't fit in the racks, I would just move it in there if I wanted to use that one. Sometimes I'd move the JD800 in there and play it, or whatever synthesizer didn't fit, I would just move it in there. And once again, I was plugging and unplugging cables and MIDI cables and audio cables, and didn't have room and couldn't move around and kept bumping into things, and it just wasn't working. I had my basement down here. However, I ran a business out of this that was used motorcycle parts. You can see I had this entire area. This was my warehouse for used motorcycle parts. The market for that started going away, so I decided, you know what, time to liquidate that business, and I got rid of all the parts. I came in and cleaned out all of this area here and turned this into my studio. So the first thing I had to do was tear down my old studio, which was no small task. Then I had to take out all the shelving, clean up the mess left behind from years of motorcycle parts being stored down here. I had some furniture to build. I had a new lift table that's going in the corner. I also have a rack that's going to hold my rack mounted devices as well as the mixer. Here's the mixer, the Behringer X32. And now I had some keyboard stands to build. I got a new one, exactly the same as my old one, and I brought a table downstairs. Brought my original keyboard stand, my Z stand down, and then brought down the other keyboard stand from the other studio. This took a while because I had to build both these stands to work exactly the same, and then figure out what synth was going to go on where and what height. And then you can see I got the little movable table for the RC505. Then it's time to start cabling up all the cables to the mixer.
Day 2.
All right, the second day I started out by connecting up power to all the different synths, as well as starting getting some of the USB connections from the synths all the way up to the PC where they're going to be. But I really wanted to get the power connected to make sure that I had everything routed correctly. This actually took a lot longer than I thought it would, especially getting the UPSs up there. And I made sure that I labeled every cable that went in there, because it's really hard to figure out what is connected to what when you don't have labels on the cables themselves. Then I started doing some work configuring the X32, making sure that it's working the way I expect it to. Put the mixer monitor up there, got the old Yamaha mixer hooked up and working. Now I'm doing some of the configuration of the X32. A helpful hint when coiling cables: don't do this, and don't do this, because what you end up with is a twisted cable. So if you actually you coil up the cable doing that, if you just like use your arm and wrap it up, it actually is twisting it around and around. So what you end up with is this twisted, coiled, tangled mess. You don't want that. So what you want to do is, once your cable is nice and straight, you want obviously all the twists and everything out of it, so it's not twisted. You want a straight cable, so as if it was used somewhere. And then start coiling it up, but you just take it one like that, and then one like this, back and forth. One side, other side. One side, other side. And just keep doing that back and forth. One side, other side. And you can see it's actually twisting it a bit because I had this cable twisted. But if it's straight, it won't do that. And now you have a nice cable that's coiled up. And when you undo it, it doesn't turn into a twisted, tangled mess. It's nice and straight again. That's the secret. So again, one side, other side. And if you ever look at guys, the roadies who are putting the tearing down a stage and putting the cables away, you will see they are doing exactly this, because it makes it so the next time they get the cables out, they aren't twisted and tangled.
Day 3.
Third day, still working on getting the audio cables connected and organizing how that Z stand is going to work. I shortened down the one side, cleaning up, getting the computer set up, wiring the computer, and bringing all the monitors and peripherals down for that computer to get it operational. Started hooking up the USB cables from all the different synthesizers that are going into the computer. Got the computer up and running. Time to box up the old 22 MTK so it can go to its home with a new owner, whoever ends up buying that. And then back to more configuration on the X32. This took quite a bit of work.
Day 4.
Back to a lot of cabling. I got the audio, some of the audio cables in, so I'm hooked up some of the audio cables. Back to working on the X32 some more and hooking up more audio cables, as you can see. Every time I start hooking up audio and MIDI, there's a lot of configuration that has to be done on the X32 and the MIDI router. The X32 especially because I didn't know it, so I had to learn it at the same time. Now I'm working on Cubase to get everything in the mixer talking to Cubase correctly. Well, we're getting there. A little slower than I had hoped, but we're getting closer to having the studio ready to go. So obviously all the keyboards came down and they are set up in that they are positioned where they're going to be. They have power, so I have run power everywhere. Everything's on the same UPSs that they were in the old studio. The old mixer, the 22 MTK that I had, is now boxed up and ready to go to whoever decides they want to buy it. My old MIDI interface here, the Motu 5, or is it, yeah, 5-port MIDI interface, that's going to go as well. I've got all the synths here, including the Poly 6 and the Juno 106, even though they have not yet been restored. They don't work, so they're not actually connected or plugged in or anything. SH101, of course, is working. I have not yet wired up the 505, because normally it has all kinds of feeds that come from the mixer so that I can record any of the synths or mics or whatever in the 505, so that will have to come soon. I do have the new Op6, which is here. I used to have the Gaia up in this spot, but now the Op6 is there. Pretty much everything else is still the same. I got the montage here on the bottom, Summit, System 8. I have changed the layout of these three synths just to make it a little more easy to work. So the montage, I actually put up on blocks here. I've got these angled blocks. I don't know if you can see. They're foam blocks. They're actually exercise blocks, but they work really good for propping up the synthesizer. I'll put a link to these so you can see where I got them from. They're cheap on Amazon, and they work really well to angle the synth up. And because of that, now the screen is really visible, and I was able to pull the montage out a little bit to give better access to the controls. I do still have the lights on under there, so it lights up. And then I have the Summit, which I've tilted down a little bit, so when I'm sitting at the console here, I can better see and access the controls here. And then the problem with that was that the System 8 here was like way up top, because these arms in here were about 2.5 inches longer than they were right here. So what I did is I ended up cutting these off and drilling new holes in here for these mounts to come on here. So I've actually lowered down the System 8 by about 2.5 inches, and it's still going to be a stand-up, but I'm no longer like reaching up and peering trying to see what it is. I can actually see and access the controls and play this easily. So this is all just ergonomics, but I'm pretty happy with how it's come out. The new mixer is over here. This is the Behringer X32, 32 inputs and 16 outputs. I've only got 4 of the 16 outputs assigned 2 will be going to the Phantom for sampling. 2 will be going over to the 505 for looping. I've got, I think, 26 of the 32 inputs assigned, so I still have a little room for expansion. I've got this. I've started working on the configuration. You can see I've got my scribble strips set up. So I've got the various channels assigned. You can see up to 26, and then of course I've got 2 mono ones here. I got the 5.6 and the SH101. Don't have stereo. And it's kind of nice that the stereo channels, you can link them. So you just move one slider and it moves both that are in there. And of course it is fully motorized. And I've also got the app over here that when you move it up and down here, it moves it on this app. And there's also an app on the computer you can also use, or you can move it here, and of course it moves it on the mixer. Very nice. And this is network, so this is running over Wi-Fi. I could technically run this mixer anywhere in the house. This functionality is actually meant for when this is being used as a live mixer. So you walk around in the room and do your mix from the floor, but it's just kind of gee whiz cool things. The good old standby, the MG12XU Yamaha, that is my Windows USB audio interface, as well as the monitor final. So the X32, its output feeds into here, and then I can also enable the click off the Phantom. The output from the 505 will go here. I've got my Alexa set up here, and this is the output from the Windows sound. I've got my monitors now on stands here, and this is the other monitor that normally will have my Cubase mix console on it. So I've got my monitors on stands here. I've got my computer set up. It's actually running. There's, hello Claudio. CC121's down here, my Stream Deck, other monitor. So over here, I have dug out my old 1200s and a mixer. I have not yet figured out where these are going to go. I was thinking they were going to go here, but I think I want to use this space for something else. So I'm thinking that I'm going to get something that goes here that fits in, and the turntables and mixer will go set up here, because all my records are down here as well. So that will be nice to have those at hand. Okay, so no audio is set up, no MIDI. I do have these 2 patch bays wired up. So the first 32 channels of the patch bay, it was at 24 through 8 here on the B, are the inputs, and the remainder of these are all the outputs. So right now they're just configured so that they're just a pass-through. But if I wanted to, I can actually plug in anything I want in here. So if I wanted to plug in a microphone, because I have channels 1 and 2 set up as microphones. Obviously this is my boom mic here, so that's channel 2, but channel 1, I can just plug it right in here and it will bypass whatever it's, I have a XLR running somewhere, and that will allow me to plug in anything in here and just bypass the default routing of wherever it's coming from. I want to label these. I haven't figured out quite yet how that's going to happen. This is my new MIDI router. It is, again, network. I can access this from anywhere in the house. It has, I forget how many MIDI ports on it. It's 8, 9, 10, 12 DIN MIDI ports, and then a whole whack of USB MIDI ports. And you can set up routing and everything in there. I have not configured this at all. This is going to take some time to learn. It does have a nice little touch screen on it, but you would normally configure this with the application that you run on a PC, because the configuration on this is so flexible that it's way too complex to try to do it from the front panel here. That is not yet wired up because I am waiting, with the exception of the 505. I think the 505 is wired up for MIDI, because I had MIDI core cables for it. And I think there's one other maybe that I did wire. Oh yeah, the JD800 is also hooked up for MIDI. I have some MIDI snakes coming, cables that will run out from here and then branch out to the various synths. I also have audio snakes coming. Before I had just individual cables that ran from the mixer to each of the synthesizers, and there was just like the spaghetti disaster full of cables. It was just perpetually tangled. It was a nightmare. So what I've done is I've ordered a whole bunch of cable snakes, kind of like the cable snakes that I use to connect the mixer and the patch bay. You can see these bundle all together. So you can see how they hook up into the patch bay there. So kind of the same idea. They'll come all plug into the patch bay, and then in the back of the patch bay, and from there the snake, I have one snake that comes out, and then we'll hook up these synths. I've got another one that will come out and hook up these, and then I've got a third one that'll come out and hook up all of these. So instead of having a huge rat's nest of cables coming and, you know, going every which way, I'll just have 3 thick cable snakes coming back into here, and then hooked up to the back of the patch bay, and that should be good. So that's where we stand at the moment. I do have my subwoofer down the corner. NTS1, I don't know if I'm going to be using that or not, but if we do, I'll find a place for it. It's still a work in progress. I still can't play any of these because I don't have any audio hooked up. Audio cables should be arriving tomorrow, and that's about it. So sign off and back into the time lapse.
3 days later.
Some days have passed, but now I have much more cables. So I'm doing some labeling of cables, USB cables, and I got some of the audio snakes. So time to start hooking up audio to the various synthesizers. I've got the audio snakes now hooked up. It's time to test them in Cubase and on the X32 mixer. You can see one of those cable snakes down there as I start hooking up audio to all the different synthesizers, as well as getting underneath that patch beta to hook up all the audio snakes. Now I had a noise problem with the SH101, so I did make a special cable that fixed that problem. I had some noise with the JD800 as well, so that is waiting for a DI or a ground fault isolator to solve that issue.
Tomorrow.
Back at it. Now I am doing more testing on the JD800. Looks like I got the ground fault interrupter in there, the isolator. So now it's working as well. I have audio on there and in the SH101. Back to the X32, back to doing some more configuration on the computer. It took quite a while to do a lot of that configuration. Now it just looks like I'm setting up to do a video. Oh, look at that. I'm making a video. So there you go. Sometimes you just gotta take some time to make a YouTube video. Now I'm editing the YouTube video, and this is the video I posted on the Modiax and Montage playing sounds to backing tracks. So here I am editing that video and posting the video to YouTube. And that's done.
Tomorrow for sure.
Okay, so we're on the home stretch here. Some more MIDI cabling. Oh, I got a MIDI snake, so now I'm hooking up MIDI snakes as well as the output audio snake that sends audio from the buses out to the various synthesizers. Lots more configuration, testing that patch bay with the patch cables, making sure that all the routing is working correctly. This took a lot of work to get it right.
Studio building update. It's now well into week 2 or 3, I forget. This was supposed to be a weekend project. What was I thinking? Okay, so where are we? All the cabling is complete. The cabling is finally complete. What I thought would take just a couple of days ended up taking almost 2 weeks, and the cabling was just a nightmare. I did map it out ahead of time, and I've got you know, a spreadsheet here so I can keep track of what's going where on my patch pay here. And then if you have a look, I've got all kinds of snakes running under here with I don't know, 48 different cables running up here, and they go every which way. And so the mixer has taken a lot more work than I thought it would be to set up everything, because not only am I learning the mixer, but I'm also trying to figure out routing while I'm learning the mixer. So I know what I want it to do most cases, and then it's a case of how do I actually accomplish that. So I mean, this thing is just incredibly flexible. You can do anything on it. I do have the Windows app for the mixer, and because the mixer is on my network, I can access it from any computer in the house, which is fantastic, including this little tablet, which is really handy because when I'm over here, working on these keyboards over here, I can't really be over there touching the mixer and messing with the mixer. So I can just grab that little tablet and set it up over here. And it was really great when I was cabling this and doing all the gain staging, because I could do all my gain staging on the tablet. Actually, and as I do it, you can actually see the sliders, on there, on the faders on the mixer actually moving. Cool. Okay, so everything is hooked up and working. You can see all the synths are playable, which is great, except obviously for the Juno 106 and the Poly 6, because they are not restored yet. They are not working, but that's coming. There are several synths in here that have inputs and outputs. The Hydra synth is one, the Phantom, the Summit, the System 8, the Montage. Actually, I think the Cobalt does as well. They've all got audio inputs. I'm not using it on all of them. However, what I have done is I've set up buses. So I've got a Phantom bus, an RC505 bus, and a Montage bus. So what that does is it lets me select what all these channels and where they're going to go. So everything in the room, all these synths feed through here into each of the buses. So if I play something on the Hydra synth, you can see, actually, well, have I got it muted out or something? Why am I not here? Yes, I do. Okay, so if I play something on the Hydra synth, which you can hear, but you can also see it's showing up on all these buses, because I've got all the stuff running into those buses. But if I play something on the Phantom, which I'm not hearing at all, why am I not hearing anything on the Phantom? Oh, because it's set to a vocoder patch. Duh. Okay, so if I play that on the Phantom, you can see it's going everywhere except, actually I got my mic up as well, so let me just kill the mic because it's picking up my voice. So it goes everywhere except it does not go to the Phantom bus, because obviously you would end up with just a loop, an audio loop, and it would produce sound, send it to the bus, back in, which would then echo it back into the mixer, and you get a horrible feedback. So the same thing goes for the Montage. The Montage, anything comes out of the Montage goes in here, but does not go back out to the Montage. So the buses are universal except for their sources. The RC505 is kind of a special deal all its own. That's so that I can use the RC505 for looping, so absolutely everything feeds into the RC505. RC505, in turn, actually runs over to this mixer, which is the monitor mixer. So I don't have it set up. I could, I guess, put the RC505 in here and use it to record, but I doubt I would ever use that. So for now, it's just running into it right there, and I can just hear it. If I want to, I can, because that is still connected to the DAW, I could record the RC505 in the DAW if I wanted to. So it's an option. Okay. Getting all that working with all the cabling and everything was really a challenge. I do have all the snakes in place, and I've got this nice little cover here to cover up all the snakes going between this keyboard stand and over here. I do have it set up so that my DAW Cubase can also route into these buses so that if I wanted to, well, let me just try that. So here's a recording of some vocals from a track that I did.
A slap in the face.
Okay, you can hear that talking there. Now if I come over here and okay, that is muted out. Why am I hearing it? Because it's coming through the Phantom, that's why. So let's go and turn the Phantom into a vocoder. So now we won't hear anything. And if I play back the vocals on here, we shouldn't hear anything. until we play something on the Phantom.
Is what you deserve. Slap of the book cover. Pushing the narrative, ignoring the logic, ahead of the curve.
Cool. So now, if I want to, when I'm tracking stuff, I can get vocals in the DAW. I can track the vocals in the DAW, and then use those vocals, feed them through this mixer, through the bus to the Phantom, and use the vocoder in the Phantom. And I could also send MIDI at the same time from the DAW into the Phantom, so I could actually use the MIDI to actuate the vocoder and the audio from the DAW into the Phantom for the vocoder at the same time. I could actually do the exact same thing on the montage. The System 8, I did not hook up to it. The System 8 has a okay vocoder. However, the problem with the System 8 is that the mic stays open all the time. So if I turn that up, see, that mic is up, and there's no way of turning it off other than turning the knob off. Whereas the Phantom, it's off, and the AD, same thing on the montage. You have the AD input off, so you can turn that off. So that's where we are right now. I have noticed that as soon as the RC505 gets turned on, it starts spewing out MIDI into my MIDI router. I have a feeling that's probably MIDI clock. I don't know yet. I've done some routing in here. I mean, this thing's crazy capable, and I've got a lot of routing set up in the PC because there's an application that lets you use the PC application to connect to this and configure it. Again, this is on the network. I could technically connect a keyboard anywhere in the house over Wi-Fi and route it through this thing, which is really cool. So I'm not quite sure why the 505 is just spewing out MIDI when it's idle. I'm hoping it's just because it's clock. I haven't gotten into it yet. So that's where we are. It's still a disaster. There's still cables and crap everywhere. I have not gotten to the turntables yet. I think I'm going to bring down a table that I have upstairs and just put it right in here, and they put a board or a tabletop on top of it that'll make it big enough that I can get these two turntables and a mixer in there, and then I'll just run that into, I don't know, probably the Yamaha mixer or something. So that's where we are. The old Signature 22 MTK mixer is there. It's going to get sold. There's my old MIDI interface, the Mo2, that's just been fantastic, but I don't need that anymore. I don't know if I'm going to sell it or keep it, just in case one day. Just disaster and mess everywhere. I'm really looking forward to getting to play some records again. And then I will get on to the Poly 6, which is the next project after this is all together and working. But I'm so close. The studio is actually, as of tonight, is usable for the first time in a couple of weeks at least, where I could actually use it to compose and record something. So that's fantastic. I'm really thrilled it's coming together.
The next day.
Boxing up the 22 MTK just in case it does sell, so it's ready to go. And now I'm bringing down the table there along with the board, setting up the 1200s, the two turntables, and getting the vinyl all working, doing some final cleanup. We're getting so close to the finish. So here's where we are. Everything is hooked up. All the audio, all the MIDI, everything. However, what is new is that I've got all the routing and everything set up on here correctly. The big thing I did was I moved this old cabinet down here, and I put a board on here, and I put my 1200s up. So these are the first time that these 1200s have seen the light of day in probably 6 or 7 years. I gotta say, they've been neglected. So I got them out, played a record. Yes, they still play. Everything works great. I got shelves full of a couple thousand records over there. So that'll be a great source of entertainment now that I have the ability to play records again. Other than cleaning up the what's left, I think I'm going to set up this as the keyboard restoral desk so that I can shoot some video on the synths that I'm restoring. And this, just needs some cleaning up, cables here and there. The upstairs studio where all this came from is still a disaster. There's cables everywhere that has to get cleaned up, but it's so close to being done. So close. I'm really excited.
Eventually.
I did a whole lot of research on audio interfaces. I really, really wanted to make sure that I would pick something that would last for a while, that I wouldn't have to upgrade again in just a couple of years. I did all kinds of research on high-end interfaces. There are some interfaces, some of the Motu interfaces, you can get like 40, 50, 60 channels, and we're talking thousands and thousands of dollars for these interfaces. So I had two real problems. One, I was running USB for MIDI for a lot of these synths, and I was out of USB resources in my dock computer. I couldn't turn on all the synths at the same time because the computer would basically lock up because I had too many USB things plugged into it. So I needed to find a way to get rid of some of the USB connections and also get more channels of audio in. And the solution to that was actually twofold. One was this Mio XL from iConnectivity, and it is a MIDI interface. So rather than running USB to all these different synthesizers, I've got MIDI running out there, but I like having individual MIDI runs to each synth. So because a lot of these synths, Montage and the Phantom, they use all the MIDI channels themselves. So you can't set up a MIDI connection and say this synth is channel 1, that synth is channel 2, because the Montage uses all 16 for itself. So I wanted to have end runs to all the different synths for MIDI in and out, and this Mio XL allows me to do exactly that. Now you can plug it in using USB, but I actually plugged it in over Ethernet. So the Mio XL is actually plugged into my network in the house. I could technically take my laptop upstairs over Wi-Fi and send MIDI to one of these synthesizers and it would play it. Or reverse, I could sit here and play on the Montage and it would record it in a DAW on a laptop up in my bedroom because it's all on the network. Same goes for the mixer that I selected, the Behringer X32. I did a lot of research and decided this is where I was going to go. I really liked having the physical control surface of the 22 MTK. It let me change and mix the sounds of the synthesizers in real time really, really quickly and easily. Plus, this has a 32-channel audio interface built into it, so all the synthesizers can then run into here. I don't have to unplug or replug anything. I've still got lots of channels free left on this, so I can expand in the future. There's some other great features that allow routing in and out. The routing matrix on this is extremely powerful, just like it is on the iConnectivity Mio. The MIDI routing on that is very, very powerful. And you can put it in DAW remote mode where you can actually work these sliders right here to control Cubase. So you can use this as a control surface for Cubase, which is amazing. You can change mute and solo, and it's all kinds of different functionality because it's Mackie HUI compliant and it will drive Cubase directly. Just extra bonus stuff. So that's what really solidified me on this. It's really my first real Behringer product purchase. I've bought like little cable testers and things in the past, but the pedigree of this is from Midis, which is a well-known, well-respected mixer manufacturer. All the firmware, the inputs, everything is all Midis. So yes, it's Behringer, but it's a high-quality unit. I expect it's going to run for years with no problems whatsoever. I'm still kind of learning it. I haven't learned absolutely everything on it, but I've got it to the point where it actually works with my DAW, and it works very well. This too is connected over the network. Not only can I connect to the computer and use applications on my computer to operate the mixer, I've got tablets here. So I can take this tablet with me, and if I walk down the other end of the room, I can have this with me and I can adjust the mixer instead of running back and forth. I can just have this sitting right back there, and it's wireless. And so if I'm channel 1 through 16 here, I can literally go on and adjust the mixer remotely, and you can see the faders actually moving as I do that. So that's a really nice feature. The patch bays are actually wired from behind and they're set up so the default is each of the synthesizers running through the patch bay into an associated channel on the mixer. However, I can use patch cables that I've got here, and if I want to, I can redo just by plugging in the front. It will then bypass the default routing, and I can make it so that if I want my montage to show up on the Cobalt, I can do that. I also have outbound. So I've got some sends set up on the mixer here so that synthesizers that have inputs where they have audio ins, I actually have sends on here running through the patch panel out to those synthesizers. But because I've got it routed through the patch bay, if I wanted to, I could actually reroute that output and send it to anywhere. If I had another piece of equipment that I just temporarily wanted to set up, I can plug it in here, route it in, route sends out, all this stuff just by simply plugging it into the patch bay here, which is really flexible and really a nice way of doing it. Took a lot of planning ahead of time. Same goes for the MIDI. I've got MIDI in and out, and the MIDI routing matrix that is set up inside the Mio XL handles what's sending what to where. It's also got USB MIDI, so if you have a class compliant synthesizer that can communicate MIDI over USB, you can actually plug it into here as well and route that just as if it was a 5-pin DIN MIDI, and you can route each of those MIDI ports to any other synthesizer or into the DAW or onto the network or out of this USB DAW connection or anywhere else. It's extremely flexible. Really, really like that Mio XL. Over here is the classic synth section. Well, except for the Gaia. Obviously the Gaia is, well, you know what? Technically, I guess this is kind of classic. I think the Gaia is a classic synth. It's not analog, it's a virtual analog, and it's obviously a few years old, but you know, it's still a fantastic synth. I really like this thing. So we have the SH101, which just finished being restored. If you haven't seen the video I did on the restoration of this, I'll put a link to it in the description below. So it's working perfect, everything's great. It is hooked up to MIDI, and it listens to MIDI clocks, so I can actually sequence this from anything in the DAW or from any other synth and record this, and it works really great. Obviously no effects on it, but I can run it through the effects in the DAW or in the X32. Juno 106, not functioning yet. This one's on the list to be restored, has not yet been started. JD800, it works great. It took so much work to get this thing restored and fixed and working again, but it's so worth it. This is another one that I did a restoration video on. I will put a link to this in the description below as well. And then the Korg Poly 6, my beloved Korg Poly 6. This was the very first synth I bought, not this one in particular, but one just like it. And now I have one again. This is actually, if I were to open it up, actually, do I have the screws in it? No, I did put it back together. I wanted to put everything here so that I could fit things and get them seated correctly. But this one actually has parts taken out of the insides, because this one is actually the one that I'm restoring right this moment. So this will be coming back, and this will be the next one up that we'll be seeing restored and working. Of course, I do still have my CC121 and my little Stream Deck, and I'll never let those go. I love those things. The CC121 you can't buy anymore. It's been discontinued. I don't know how I would work without it, because I'm so used to using it for all my transport controls and filter editing and everything, to the point where I've almost forgotten some of my key commands, Cubase, because I use the CC121 for everything. So what have I got? Roland System 8, Novation Summit, Montage 7, Korg Wave State, Korg Op 6, the Moto Cobalt 8X, Hydrasynth Deluxe, the Phantom 06, RC505, the Roland Gaia SH01, Roland SH101, Roland Juno 106, Roland JD800, and the Korg Poly 6. It's a lot of synthesizers, but I love them all, and they will all be featured in videos coming in the future, so I hope you will love them too. If you have any questions or comments or anything at all, suggestions especially, I'm really open to suggestions or ideas that you might have that I could use to improve the studio. It's not completely finished. It's so close, but it's almost done, but not quite. So if you do have any ideas or suggestions or corrections, please leave them in the comments below. I will really appreciate all the comments from you guys. You're just fantastic. And of course, the part that makes everyone tune out instantly, please click like, subscribe, click the little bell. It really helps when you do that. And you get notified every time we post one of these videos. Thanks for watching.